Why is President Trump worried about the deal the United Kingdom struck that hands sovereignty of Diego Garcia to Mauritius while giving 99-plus-year leases to the US military? Laura Trump believes President Trump is preparing to disclose extraterrestrials. Trump pushes Pentagon to open UFO sites as lawmakers hint at UFO craft and non-human intelligence bodies. SpaceX's plans to build thousands of starships will make redundant legacy aerospace corporations' initiative such as SLS that takes up to 3 years between launches. What can go wrong if ethical restraints are removed from AI used for warfare? These stories and more on ExoPolitics Today, the week in review.
You're listening to ExoPolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the ExoPolitics Today Week in Review for February 7. I'm glad to be presenting another Week in Review for you. I still have this nasty cough, but I will work through it and present to you the top news stories over the last week. So let's see how we do. So my first story is a tweet from Jean-Charles Moyen, where he discussed having a teleportation experience inside of Greenland, where he saw a space ark. He says that in this experience, he was taken to this very large underground ice cavern in Antarctica, and that he saw a very large cavern, and that there were these black uniformed clad men, kind of like just a little bit above average height, 6'6", that sort of height, and that they were using some kind of gun to free or direct it against these giants or these very tall beings that were embedded in the ice, and next to it was this ice ark or this very large ship. Jean-Charles also described going into another section of the cavern where he saw a very large red crystal. He also says that the cavern that he saw was inside this mega canyon underneath the Greenland ice sheets. So there actually is a canyon under Greenland, under the ice sheets, which is actually bigger than the Grand Canyon. So that's very interesting to have encountered that. So Jean-Charles described his experience in this canyon, and that these beings, these black-clad beings, were actually, they spoke German, but they were Saurian based on the eyes. So he thought that they were trying to take control of the ark. So very, very interesting. We've come across this before. JP, or Jorge Pabon, has described encountering similarly black-clad soldiers trying to take over a space ark in the Pacific Ocean, for example. He says he was taken to a underground location, or actually he was taken to a space ark in the Pacific Ocean, where again there were these black-clad men trying to take control of the ark. They wanted to use him and a Nordic for that, but he declined. Jean-Charles Moyen did another, well, he actually returned to the Greenland ice cavern where he saw this craft for a second time, and this is a illustration of the beings he saw. He said that these guys spoke German. They were wearing all black, but when one of them took off their goggles, you could see the eyes were clearly non-human, saurian. So this is some kind of hybrid extraterrestrial or reptilian, with human genetics that is presumably part of the Dark Fleet being the German space program. Now, the connection to the Dark Fleet is very, very interesting. When Jean-Charles first tweeted these stories, I remember what I was told by Dr. Anton Anfilov, who was really the first to talk about the Germans setting up bases in Greenland during World War II, and that they had found a lot of things there under the ice sheets in Greenland. So the Germans were the first. So I guess it's not all that surprising that today you'll find a German presence in Greenland under the ice sheets. Does this explain why President Donald Trump is so eager for the US to gain greater control over Greenland? I think possibly it does. I think it does give us an idea of what it is that's really happening at the exopolitical realm, that you have it's not just conventional politicking in terms of like the Russians or the Chinese competing for access to Greenland. We also have a German Dark Fleet presence there that is very historic, and so that's another factor. So here's a story on RT.com where the Pentagon wants killer AI without safeguards. So the Department of War has clashed with one of its contractors, Anthropic, over the ethical limitations built into its technology. So the Pentagon apparently is wanting companies to develop AI without any kind of ethical restraints. And I presume that that would be up to the Pentagon to determine whether or not there would be ethical constraints. But, I mean, that really does lead to a kind of like a Terminator-like scenario in the future where AI gets out of control. AI has been trained to kill humans, to operate without any kind of ethical limitations, and that can't be a good thing. So I'm certainly thinking that this is something that someone has to step in and really kind of like make it clear that if you want to develop AI or use it in modern warfare, that there needs to be some kind of ethical constraint on the way it operates. Otherwise, you're just going to train the AI to be a killer, to kill humans, and that's going to have a very bad consequences for humanity. And David Adair was one of the people that brought this to my attention. Here is a actual presentation that Stuart Swerdlow did in a webinar I organized for December 13 of 2025. And we thought we'd release it to the general public just because it really does have some very important predictions in there about what's coming in 2026. Global disclosure, secret space programs, and the end of the old world order. And Stuart, he's a Montauk survivor. He has a lot of inside contacts, and he does really share some very important information from his sources. So that was released. Okay, so here's a notice from the NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, who says that the wet dress rehearsal for the launch of Artemis 2, which uses the SLS rocket system, that's been delayed now to March. So that means that there has been more than 3 years between these SLS launches. And these SLS launches, I mean, this is a rocket produced by legacy corporations. And we're talking, I think it's Boeing and Lockheed are behind the SLS participation in the Artemis program. And the Artemis program has the goal of returning humans to the moon and then and then actually going to Mars. Now, the problem here is that this legacy aerospace project, the SLS rocket, takes years to develop and to test. And that does actually raise a very important question. Well, is this all designed to really just delay the advent of an interplanetary civilization on Earth, that even using conventional rockets, that you have those groups, those legacy corporations that don't want humanity to become an interplanetary civilization anytime soon? So if that's the case, then we can be thankful that SpaceX and Elon Musk have been able to perfect the reusable rocket, and they are planning to build thousands of starships in the future. And the ultimate result is going to be that Earth becomes an interplanetary civilization. Meanwhile, Lockheed, Boeing, and other legacy aerospace companies, they continue to build fleets of anti-gravity craft for classified space programs that are capable of interplanetary travel, while pretending they don't know what's behind UAPs that have been successfully reverse engineered for decades. Okay, so here is something that as a notice from Jean-Charles Moyen, and he talked about a interview featuring Dan Winter, who was discussing Jean-Charles Moyen's test, where Jean-Charles was subjected to a device designed to study gamma brainwave activities. And those gamma brainwave activities are very rare, and they're associated with very high states of consciousness. And in this video featuring Dan Winter, he publicly presented the results of his test of Jean-Charles Moyen, showing that the testing really did validate what Jean-Charles was claiming, that he is able to teleport to different locations, and that the teleportation actually involves a high concentration of gamma brainwave activity. Now, this is very significant because, unfortunately, that video featuring Dan Winter discussing the gamma brainwaves of Jean-Charles Moyen, that was removed from another researcher's website who has had a falling out with Jean-Charles. And that's very unfortunate, because it's not just an example of cancel culture, it's also an example of manipulating data so that someone that you no longer like or approve of, one day you're saying, well, this person's the best thing since sliced bread and has been teleporting to space arcs all over the place. And now you change your story and say, well, this person is making that all up. That's very, I think, immature to be doing something like that. But that is what's happening. And I just wanted to call the public's attention to the fact that, regardless of your relationship with other UFO researchers, and I mean, it's a normal part of life. We have falling outs with people that we research, and one day we have a tense relationship, and so it's broken. But nevertheless, I think that the work you did with that person should be left to stand on its own, rather than being removed because now all of a sudden, you've changed your mind and you don't want to promote or support that person. And I'm very thankful that in the 20 plus years of my exopolitics research, I struggle to think of any example of removing an interview or an article I did just because I had a falling out with someone. And I have had falling outs with a few people along the road. I mean, it does happen. It's rare, but I never remove articles about them or interviews concerning them. I just leave them up for posterity. And so it's unfortunate that Jean-Charles has been subjected to this kind of cancel culture. Well, here is a statement from Timothy Alberino, which I thought was very succinct and accurate. And what he says in this post is Satanism is for the vulgar masses, sex magic, ritual abuse, pedophilia, the drinking of blood, consumption of human flesh, all conspicuously paraded in popular culture. Its symbols are pervasive and its practitioners are suspected by all. Now, this is the key point. Luciferianism is for the initiated few. It hides beneath a mask of benevolence and does not make a show of its influence. Its deceptions are subtle and intoxicating. Its adepts are cunning and elusive. Though they perch on the summit of power, no one knows their names. Epstein was not at the top of the food chain. He was a henchman and a fall guy. Okay, so what Timothy is saying here is that, when we look at these dark organizations out there, especially when we're looking at the Epstein files and the activities that were occurring, a lot of that involves Satanism, and that's where you have the SRA and sacrifice of people, consumption of flesh, all those very dark things. But that Luciferianism is much more subtle and restricted to a much smaller circle, but nevertheless, it is also very deceptive and subtle and very cunning. So I thought this was a very important observation by Timothy as we seek to understand what's really happening with all these Epstein file releases and the realization that these files really does support these conspiracy theories about Satanism operating from behind the scenes. But there's also Luciferianism, which is even more subtle and also operates behind the scenes. So this led to me asking the question, who in the Anunnaki hierarchy played the roles of Satan, Lucifer, and Yahweh? I think we have the same characters, the same Anunnaki lords playing those roles. And personally, I think Yahweh was Enlil, Satan was Marduk, and I think Lucifer was Ea or Enki. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so here is another video presentation from a December 13 webinar I did, where I had Stuart Swerdlow and also Lily Nova presenting what they have been told about 2026. So Lily has been really hitting the ball out of the ballpark recently with some of her predictions. She's doing a lot of great work. And so now her video or her presentation from this webinar presentation is now available online. So you can watch it on YouTube, Rumble, and so forth. So here's a story where you have Donald Trump pushing the Pentagon to open UFO sites as lawmakers hint at UFO craft and non-human intelligence bodies. So this is a fairly long tweet. I don't want to go over it all, but it covers how there's a group of lawmakers, and Timothy Burchett is pointing here, and Anna Paulina Luna, Eric Burleson, and his name kind of slips me at the moment. But there's a group of lawmakers who are really pushing the envelope when it comes to UFO disclosure, having whistleblowers come in and brief members of Congress to hold hearings on UFOs, and that this is unprecedented to have the US Congress being so active in the UFO issue. And apparently, according to this article, Donald Trump is quietly behind this, that he hasn't yet really kind of stepped into the fray to throw his full force behind it, but he is supporting it. So that would actually explain a lot why these members of Congress seem to be able to operate, how they're able to get a lot of whistleblowers to come forward and talk to them and share their information. So certainly Donald Trump looks as though he is from behind the scenes pushing the Pentagon to open these UFO sites wherever they are in the US so that the lawmakers can have greater access. So there's a transformation happening in the United States. There's a struggle for disclosure, and we are watching it play out in front of our eyes as these kind of like legacy UFO programs are fighting to keep everything secret, but you've got members of Congress backed by Donald Trump who are really pushing for the truth to come out. All right, so here is a statement from Laura Trump, who's married to Donald Trump's son, Eric, and she believes that President Trump is ready or is preparing to disclose the truth about extraterrestrials. So let's listen to what Laura Trump has to say about her father-in-law and disclosure.
What do you or the president know about UFOs? Can you share? I hear that the president has something in the queue to share with us about all of this. Now, truth be told, I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. It may have been right after he left office, after the first term. I remember Eric being like, all right, what can you tell us? And he was a little hesitant to give us any real info, which makes me think like he's got a lot of info out there and he's waiting for the right time to drop it. And maybe this is going to be the time, because I keep seeing all these stories about how he's got some like UFO speech that he's got queued up, and we all should just kind of sit back and wait. Now, here's the thing I'll say. What do I know about UFOs? What I know is that our universe is so enormous. It actually, if I start thinking about it, it makes me a little crazy.
Okay, well, I think her point's being made. I mean, she heard from Eric Trump about her father-in-law's views about UFOs, that he's about to say something, and she goes on to talk about how big the universe is, or how big the galaxy is, and that the idea that we're alone in the universe is ridiculous. So yeah, totally agree with her. Now, here we have my final story, which is that President Trump put out a truth post where he said that he retains the right to militarily secure and reinforce the American presence in Diego Garcia, and that he spoke out after a phone call with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, why would Donald Trump do this? Because what's happened is that the British government has struck a deal with Mauritius. Mauritius was given sovereignty or control over the Chagos Islands, which includes Diego Garcia. And so under this deal, Diego Garcia would be handed over to Mauritius in terms of sovereignty, and the US would be given a 99-year lease, which could be extended by 39 years. And that the problem here, though, is that Mauritius has deepening ties with China, and in the future may not renew or abandon the leasing agreement with the UK and the US and decide to hand over the base to China. Now, that would be a big problem, because that would enable China to access the deep underground military base under Diego Garcia that has been used for decades in secret space programs, and would also interfere with major resupply operations with different secret space programs at Diego Garcia. So a lot happening right now over Diego Garcia at the same time as events are playing out concerning Greenland and the possibility that there is a giant space ark under Greenland, which is being sought after by reptilian entities. Well, that's it for this week in review. I'm going to try to keep them short from now until I recover my full health and get rid of this cough. So thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to ExoPolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.